My name is Stella Anderson. I'm 31 years old. And earlier this year, my parents rang my doorbell for the first time in 13 years. They were not there to apologize. My mother stepped into my hallway, smiled like no time had passed at all, and said, "Your brother starts college next year. Surrender this apartment to him so he can get used to it." My father stood behind her, nodding like this was the most reasonable request in the world. So I answered, "Or you could kick him out like you did to me and let him figure it out himself." My mother called me heartless. My father called me ungrateful. My brother texted me that same night to say I owed them. But here's what none of them knew. 1 week later, a clerk at the county recorder's office would slide 2 pages across a counter toward me, and my quiet little family would never survive what was printed on them. Let me back up to that Saturday morning. 9 a.m., 2 sharp knocks, then the chime. I opened the door, and there they stood. My mother, Evelyn, held a plate of warm lemon loaf like a peace treaty. My father, Richard, had his arms crossed before he even said hello. 13 years of total silence, and they walked in like they had been over for Sunday dinner last week. My mother toured my living room with her eyes. She priced the leather sofa. She priced the custom blinds. Then she got straight to it. "It just makes sense, honey. You're alone here. 2 bedrooms for 1 person is wasteful. Leo needs a proper start." I asked where I was supposed to live. She waved a hand like the question was unrefined. "You could rent something smaller nearby. You're used to hard times." He isn't. My father finally spoke, and it was a directive, not a request. "Your brother starts college next year. This is what the family needs from you." The family. That word did something cold to my spine. I thought about the last thing this family needed from me 13 years ago and what it had cost me. So I kept my voice level and said it. "Or you could kick him out like you did to me and let him figure it out himself." The lemon loaf hit my kitchen counter with a thud. My mother's eyes filled on cue, right on schedule, tears at the ready like she kept them in her purse. "How can you be so selfish, Stella? It's just an apartment." My father pointed an index finger at my face and told me my mother had sacrificed everything for me. I opened the door and held it wide. That night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "This is Leo. Mom's right. You owe us." You're probably wondering what I meant at the door. Before we dive deeper into how this story unfolds, take a quick second to subscribe so you don't miss a single twist. Drop a comment below with which country you're watching from today. I would love to say hello to you and see how far our quiet little story is traveling around the world. So, here is the part of the story I don't tell people. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Ohio, the first child of Richard and Evelyn Anderson. My brother Leo came along when I was 14. And 2 weeks after my high school graduation, I came home from my late shift at the local diner and found cardboard boxes stacked on the front porch. My boxes, my clothes, my books, my high school yearbooks, packed by someone else's hands and set by the door like a thrift store donation drop. My mother stood on the porch steps with her arms tightly crossed. I asked what was happening, and she said the sentence I have heard echoing in my mind for 13 years. "We can only afford one future." I remember laughing because I thought it had to be a cruel joke. It wasn't. My father came outside and explained, as calm as a man reading a grocery receipt, that I was 18 now, legally an adult, and legally they were finished. My old bedroom was already being converted into a study lounge for Leo. He was 4. He needed space to develop, my mother said. Room for his little desk, his toys, his bright future. I asked where I was supposed to sleep that night. Nobody answered. Here's the detail that still makes my blood run cold. That exact same month, while I was sleeping in the back seat of my sedan behind the diner, my parents put a heavy down payment on a brand new luxury SUV. They weren't broke. They had simply done the math, and I had been rounded down to 0. By the end of that week, my mother had taken every single picture of me off the hallway wall. When someone at church asked her about me, she told them I had run off on my own to pursue a rebellious lifestyle. That was her public story. But there was one person in our family who knew the truth. My grandfather, Arthur Anderson, was my father's father, and he was everything my father was not. He was 70 that summer, a retired carpenter with sawdust on his sleeves and a grip like an iron clamp. When he learned where I had been sleeping, he drove his rust-spotted pickup truck straight to the diner, loaded my boxes into the back without saying a word, and took me to his house on Elm Street. I stayed in his spare room for 8 months. He never once treated me like a burden. He treated me like family. Every morning he would tap his knuckles on the wooden kitchen table while I sorted my shift paychecks and bills into envelopes and say the exact same phrase. Paper remembers what people forget, Stella. Keep every receipt of your life. Have you ever had someone in your life who stood up for you when everyone else turned away? Tell me about them in the comments down below. Their kindness deserves to be remembered. Grandfather Arthur was furious with my father. I heard him on the phone late one night, his voice low and rock solid, telling Richard, "A man who empties his own daughter's room hasn't got a son's name coming to anything of value." My mother's response was to ban young Leo from visiting him. She told the extended family that Arthur had chosen sides. He had, and he never once apologized for it. One evening, he found me sitting at his table, crying quietly over a community college application I couldn't afford. He slid the application back toward me with a bank check paperclip to the corner. "This is a 0% loan, payable strictly in Sunday visits," he said softly. Then he looked around his sturdy house, the workshop out back, the custom oak floors he had laid with his own hands, and whispered something I filed away as just a sweet old man being comforting. "This house will keep you safe someday, sweetheart." I didn't know then that his promise had been formally written down on legal parchment, nor did I realize what my parents would do years later to try and bury it. The next decade became the chapter of my life I am most proud of. I waited tables at night and took accounting classes in the morning. It took me 6 full years to complete a 4-year bachelor's degree, paying cash as I went, and I have never been ashamed of that slow timeline. Numbers don't play favorites. Numbers don't pack your bags while you're working a shift. A financial ledger has never once told me it could only afford one future. At age 28, I signed my name dozens of times in a title office and walked out as the sole owner of a pristine 2-bedroom condominium in downtown Oak Ridge. I sat on my empty living room floor that first night with a folding chair and a box of pizza, listening to the deadbolt click shut. It was the very first door in my entire life that locked on my side. Through every milestone, my single connection to my past remained Grandfather Arthur. Sunday roast dinners, games of cribbage, and listening to his stories. He paid off that college loan in visits, just like he promised, right up until his heart began to fail. He passed away peacefully 3 years ago, at age 82. The cracks in my family's quiet facade began, as they so often do, right at his funeral. My mother appointed herself the master of ceremonies for grief. She hugged me tightly in front of the gathered mourners, long enough for everyone to notice, and whispered that we ought to be a family again. Then she ushered me over to a side table with the guest book and a stack of blank cardstock. "Sign these thank you notes, honey. Just your signature. Donna will mail them out for us." Donna was her closest church friend, a local notary. I signed them. You don't audit a funeral. A few weeks after the funeral, I asked my mother about Arthur's estate and the house on Elm Street. She sighed dramatically and told me there was nothing left, that the estate was overwhelmed with debts, and the house had to be transferred to my father to settle what Arthur supposedly owed. It smelled wrong, but as an accountant, I had a feeling and no proof yet. I filed my doubts away like an unmatched receipt. Which brings us back to the present, right after I quoted their own eviction back to them at my apartment door. The campaign against me started Sunday morning, 11 missed calls before church service. My mother left weeping voicemails about how she couldn't imagine what she did to deserve such a cold daughter. My father sent stern messages demanding my attendance at a family meeting to discuss the handover of my property. Then came the flying monkeys, relatives, and church acquaintances messaging me to prey on my selfishness. Thursday evening, a quick, nervous knock rattled my door. It wasn't my parents. It was my 17-year-old brother, Leo. He strutted in, wearing an attitude he hadn't earned, and looked around my condo like an appraiser. "Mom says you owe us," he announced, sprawling across my couch. "You got a head start living rent-free with Grandpa anyway. Mom says he wasn't right in the head at the end." I kept my face impassive and my mouth shut. And that's when he made a crucial slip. Scrolling his phone, he muttered, "It's not like they're asking for much. The house money's basically gone. Dad's auto repair shop ate all of it. Your place fixes everything." Everything inside me went deadly still. "What house money, Leo?" I asked softly. He froze, realizing he'd blabbed something confidential, grabbed his keys, and bolted out. The next morning, I took a day off work and went straight to the county recorder's office. Public records don't lie, don't cry, and don't manipulate. I asked the clerk to pull the property index for the Elm Street address. There it was in black and white. 3 years ago, the title transferred from the estate of Arthur Anderson to my father, Richard Anderson, as sole owner. But recorded right alongside the transfer was a document I had never seen in my entire life, a disclaimer of interest. The person disclaiming and walking away from any inheritance was listed as Stella R. Anderson, and at the bottom, above a notary seal, sat a signature that was supposed to be mine. If you were in my shoes and discovered your own family forged your signature to steal your inheritance, what would you do? Hit that like button if you're ready for justice, and leave a comment below. I paid the county clerk for certified copies of the deed, the disclaimer, and the full probate filings. Sitting in my car, I examined the notary stamp. It was notarized in person by Donna Pruitt, my mother's church friend, on March 14th, 3 years ago. A cold realization hit me. March 14th. I knew that exact date because my accounting firm had sent me to a mandatory regional conference in Columbus, over 2 hours away. I went home, pulled my archived file box, and laid the documents side by side. On one side was the forged disclaimer claiming I stood in a local kitchen in Oak Ridge signing away my rights. On the other side were my official corporate records, hotel folios, conference badge, timestamp scans, mileage expense receipts, and breakfast charges, all proving I was 200 miles away at the exact hour Donna Pruitt swore under legal oath that I was standing in front of her. I took the evidence straight to Carol Jennings, a sharp probate attorney. She looked at the conference timestamps, then at the disclaimer signature, and smiled grimly. "This isn't a family dispute anymore, Stella. This is documented criminal fraud." But Carol needed one more thing. "Did your grandfather actually leave a written will?" My grandfather never did anything without telling his lifelong best friend and neighbor, Earl Hobbs. That evening, I drove out to Earl's quiet home. The moment 79-year-old Earl saw me, he looked profoundly relieved. "Arthur said you'd eventually come, Stella," he said, handing me a handcrafted cedar box. "He told me when Stella comes asking questions, and she will, because she's the only one in that family who checks the math, you put this straight into her hands." Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandfather Arthur alongside a card for a local law firm with a note. "We'll execute it and on file here. Ask for the original." The letter's opening sentence brought tears to my eyes. "The house on Elm Street is yours when I'm gone. Paper remembers, Stella." Carol immediately went to work locating the transferred legal files while my mother escalated her campaign. Evelyn actually showed up at my accounting firm's lobby carrying cookies and putting on a weeping performance for my colleagues about how I was letting my little brother end up homeless. I escorted her out firmly, telling her, "You may leave the cookies. The performance goes with you." That night, my father called with a final ultimatum. "Family meeting, end of the week. You'll show up and agree to transfer your condo to your brother, or as far as this family is concerned, you don't exist." By Friday afternoon, Carol called my office with major news. The archived files had finally been located. Grandfather Arthur's original, validly witnessed will was found intact, explicitly leaving the house on Elm Street directly to me. Meanwhile, my parents had placed a bright new for sale sign in the front yard of the Elm Street house, rushing to sell it to cover my father's failing business debts and pay for Leo's luxury college plans. Carol didn't hesitate. On Tuesday morning, she filed an emergency petition in county court to reopen the estate, invalidate the forged disclaimer, and freeze the title. We slapped a lease pendens on the property, a legal red flag that legally blocked any sale. Within 48 hours, the for sale sign vanished from the yard. The formal court process servers walked right up my parents' driveway while my mother was watering her lawn and served them with the lawsuit in broad daylight. My father called me seconds later, practically screaming through the phone, "You're suing your own parents? Family doesn't sue family." I sat in total composure and replied, "You're about 14 years late on that threat, Dad." Under legal pressure, Donna Pruitt, the church friend who notarized the fake document, completely broke down. Facing state investigation and the revocation of her notary license, she submitted a sworn statement admitting the truth. My mother had brought her the document already signed, claiming I was too busy to show up, and asked her to stamp it as a personal favor. Donna never actually saw me sign a thing. Next came the forensic document examiner's report. The 20-page analysis proved conclusively that my signature wasn't written naturally, it was carefully traced. The examiner even identified the source material. My mother had collected my signature from the guest book and blank thank you cards I signed at grandfather Arthur's funeral. They harvested my handwriting next to my grandfather's casket while I was grieving, traced it onto a document to steal my inheritance, and had a church friend stamp it. My mother attempted one last maneuver, asking to meet me for coffee, just us women. She offered me a deal. If I dropped the lawsuit, she and my father would allow me to keep my own condo and agree never to tell the family what I'd done. I looked at her, smiled, and said, "You're offering me my own apartment? Did you notarize that promise too?" Her face turned cold as stone. "You were always the difficult one," she snapped. "Leo is worth 10 of you." At the emergency court hearing, my parents chose not to testify. Their attorney knew the case was hopeless. The judge reviewed Donna Pruitt's sworn confession, my hotel and conference receipts from Columbus, and the forensic handwriting report. She formally voided the forged disclaimer, reopened grandfather Arthur's estate, and declared his original will fully valid. The house on Elm Street was officially declared mine. The legal victory was absolute, but the final battle was scheduled for Sunday evening. My father called every living relative, organizing a massive shaming circle at their house to publicly condemn me. Aunt Linda warned me on Saturday night. "Sharon has spent all week telling everyone you're trying to ruin your father over an old house. If you don't show up, that's the only story they'll ever hear." I didn't panic. Instead, I spent Saturday night doing what I do best. I built a thick, color-coded trial binder. Inside were certified copies of the deed, the hotel records, Donna's confession, the handwriting analysis, the judge's order, and grandfather Arthur's original letter. Accountants don't do emotional shouting matches, we present exhibits. On Sunday afternoon, I walked up the driveway of my childhood home for the first time in 13 years. Inside sat 12 relatives, arranged in rows around the extended dining room table. Leo was seated right in front, like a poster boy for innocence, flanked by framed baby photos. My parents stood at the head of the table like prosecutors. When I entered, the temperature in the room dropped instantly. My father slammed his fist on the table and started his opening speech. "We're family here, and family doesn't sue family. But Stella has some explaining to do." My mother joined in with practiced tears. "We could only ever afford one future, and Stella has never forgiven us for being poor. Now she's taking it out on her baby brother." I sat down in the single empty chair, set my color-coded binder flat on my lap, and let her speak. I didn't interrupt once. Rope has to be paid out completely before it goes tight. When she finally finished her dramatic speech, I looked up quietly and asked my very first question. "Where is grandfather Arthur's house today?" My father blinked, startled. "What does that have to do with anything? It's being sold for estate debts?" "What debts?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Does anyone in this room remember grandfather Arthur ever having a single debt?" An uncomfortable silence swept through the room. My great-aunt frowned, remembering that Arthur always paid cash for everything. My father's jaw clenched. "The paperwork is private. Who inherited the house when he passed?" I asked next. My father made the classic mistake arrogant men always make. "I did legally," he barked. "You signed the disclaimer walking away, girl, so don't sit in my house acting robbed." I looked around at the murmuring relatives, opened my binder, and said, "Let's talk about the day that paper was signed. Have you ever had to sit quietly while someone lied about you, knowing you held the exact proof to dismantle them? Tell me in the comments below. I passed the first stack of documents to my great-aunt and asked her to hand them down the line. Exhibit A, I said clearly, a certified copy of the disclaimer of interest, notarized in Oak Ridge on March 14th, 3 years ago, claiming I personally appeared to sign away my inheritance. The pages moved down the row of relatives. Exhibit B, I continued. My corporate conference badge scans in hotel folios from Columbus on that exact same week, complete with timestamps. I was 200 miles away attending mandatory seminars on the exact day that Notary Stamp swears I stood in a kitchen in town. My uncle looked up in shock. My great-aunt placed her hand over her mouth. Exhibit C, I said, flipping to the next tab. The sworn, legally binding confession of Donna Pruitt, admitting my mother brought her a document already signed and asked her to illegally stamp it. Exhibit D, the forensic document examiner's report proving my signature was traced from the funeral guest book. And Exhibit E, the court order setting aside the fake document, reopening the estate, and restoring Grandfather Arthur's real will. I pulled out the copy of Arthur's original will and laid it on the center of the table, leaving the house on Elm Street directly to me. Leo reached across the table, picked up the will, and turned ghostly pale. Grandpa left it to her? He whispered. Then why did Mom buy me a dorm fridge? My mother erupted from her chair. The polished church lady persona shattered completely. I did it for this family, she screamed across the room. For Leo. That house was just sitting there and you had abandoned us. Somebody had to think about this family's future. She lunged toward my side of the table. 30 years I sacrificed, and you sit there with your binder like a cold little judge. My father slammed both palms onto the table, sending coffee cups rattling. I'll bury you in lawyers. I'll fight this to my last dollar. I remained seated. I kept my hands folded neatly over my closed binder. When I spoke, I dropped my voice to a whisper, forcing the entire room to fall silent to hear me. You told me you could only afford one future, so I went and built my own, I said. And Dad, family doesn't sue family, but family doesn't forge family signatures either. I opened the plastic sleeve on top of the binder and read the final sentence in Grandfather Arthur's handwriting. Paper remembers what people forget. The house on Elm Street is yours. Nobody spoke. Aunt Linda stood up, walked around the table, and sat in the chair right next to mine. My mother's sisters began gathering their purses in total silence. The entire audience my mother had assembled stood up, turned their backs, and walked out the front door. Leo bolted for the front porch, and I followed him out. I found him leaning against the railing, crying with a mix of anger and confusion. I didn't know, he choked out, staring at the ground. They told me you walked out on us when I was 4, that you hated us. He reached into his hoodie pocket and held out a shiny brass key. Mom gave me this weeks ago and said it was to your apartment building. I don't want your apartment. I don't want any of this now. I took the key, a fake prop my mother had used to manipulate him, and gave my little brother the plain truth. They packed my boxes 2 weeks after high school graduation. Grandfather Arthur took me in off the street, when nobody else would. I never walked out on anyone, Leo. I was thrown out. He wiped his face with his sleeve, looking small and defeated. So what happens to me now? I stood on the porch where my own belongings had once been stacked like trash, and gave him the answer my parents should have given 13 years ago. Nobody is kicking you out, Leo. You're 17, and you get to grow up better than the people raising you. Financial aid applications open in October. Come to my apartment and I'll show you how to fill them out properly. That's what I can give you. Behind us, inside the house, my mother's voice was still going, trying to explain herself to a room that had already emptied out. I drove home to my condo, turned my key in the lock, and stepped inside my side of the door. Here is how the paper trail finally closed. Grandfather Arthur's estate was settled legally, and the title to the Elm Street house was recorded in my name. My parents' attorney negotiated a structured repayment plan for the 3 years of stolen rent money, along with my legal fees, because my father's pride evaporated the moment criminal fraud charges were on the table. Donna Pruitt lost her notary commission, and the state licensing board handled the rest. My parents updated their story for the town, casting themselves as tragic victims of an ungrateful daughter's greed. Though very few people listen to them anymore, the church committee quietly asked my mother to step down from her leadership position. In the fall, Leo started at the state university 2 hours away. His tuition was covered by grants, work-study programs, and a warehouse job he works on weekends. He filled out every single form at my kitchen table over pizza while I offered advice. As for grandfather Arthur's house, I restored his workshop in the back first, hanging his hand tools back up on the wall. On the stairway inside, I hung the framed photos my grandfather had saved, including one of me at 18 on his porch, standing next to my packed boxes, smiling through the pain. My father's phone number remains blocked. My mother sent a long, tearful letter around the holidays, which I returned unopened. Reconciliation requires two honest people, and at the moment, I can only vouch for myself. Leo comes over during his college breaks. He mows the lawn at Elm Street in wobbly diagonal lines that would make our grandfather laugh, and then we eat lunch together on the porch. That is the family I have now, small, honest, and completely built on truth. If someone ever shows up at your front door demanding the life you built for yourself, remember this: love that arrives with a moving truck for your things was never love at all. And paper, kept patiently, always remembers what people try to forget. What did you think of Stella's journey? What would you have done if you walked into that family meeting with that color-coded binder? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs the courage to set firm boundaries today.